everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today we're going to go to this interesting case where the kind of person who you would put really low on the victim risk assessment list, like this woman should never have been murdered, but she was. And because of that, it's an unsolved case, and there really has been no resolution as to what happened to her. This good-hearted pastor. I mean, one of those things where you just say, this shouldn't happen to a person like her. Maybe more for somebody like me, but not her. Absolutely not her. And I'll get into what kind of wonderful woman she was in just a minute. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody who is in the chat room, because I didn't get to do so before I started the show because I was so busy. Michaela is here, Sandra is here, Alyssa is here, Texas Redhead is here, Martin is here from the UK. Benny is here. My goodness, people are, it is an early show today, so people can be awake in the UK. Let's see who else is here. Nicole is here. Sky Ricky is here. I'm just rolling up here. Jill is here. Let's see. Les is here. What was that? Les is here. Les, maybe not Les. I don't know which. Not quite sure I said that right. Les, where are you, Les? Where'd you go? Susanna's here. Kelly's here. Okay, wait a minute. I've lost you in here. Everybody is here. Linda's here. It's hard to, I say, it's always hard to see these little things here. Wait a minute, what happened to you? Because you had a good question and a good comment, and Sandra's here. Lex, oh, not Les, but Lex. Lex, you had an interesting comment about John Douglas, which I want to answer, because this is going to be a show about how profilers and other people look at this particular case, how they analyze it, and what they come up with as their analysis or determination, who they think killed her and why. And it's fascinating because it really is very varied. And this will give you an idea how hard it is when it comes down to being absolute about profiling, which you shouldn't be. I'm a criminal profiler, and I like to say, when I analyze something, you ought to buy it hook, line, and sinker. You know, you should just buy it. I'm a professional. You should accept exactly what I say, or what John Douglas says, or what any other profiler says, because they're with the FBI, they've had years of experience or whatever. That's not the way it works, because depending on the information you have and depending on how you view it, it can vary. And the most important thing to always remember is profiling should really be done in the investigative stage. That's why I like to call what I do, if I'm actually working for a police department, is investigative criminal profiling. Not just criminal profiling, investigative criminal profiling, because I want the profiling to stay in the investigative stage, where I help detectives understand what I think happened and what avenues will be the best avenues to look at. It's not a pronouncement of this is who did it and this is where you'll find them. It's not that nonsense. It's giving good avenues. And when the detectives get better avenues to go down, then they may therefore find more evidence to actually arrest and convict. The whole point is to find the right person and have the evidence to support that you found the right person. So this is a show where I'm not saying I exactly know who did anything. My show is educational, as I point out over and over again. I'm not here to absolutely prove somebody did it or somebody didn't do it. I'm not here to prove somebody's innocence with 50 videos and say, I'm here to fight for them. No, I'm here to teach thinking, how a profiler would think through these things, how a detective should think through these things, or how somebody wanting to be a detective should do this, or how regular folks can apply these methodologies of thinking to their lives and find the best avenues of life to pursue. All right. It's not a pronouncement. Okay. So, and by the way, if you're new to the channel, please do like and subscribe to the channel. This channel can't survive without subscribers, and subscribing is free. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications, all the shows I do. And all my shows are 100% public. There's nothing hidden. Also check my playlists to see whether there's something on the playlist you're interested in, which I have hundreds of videos now. So the case you may find fascinating might already be there. If you'd like to be in the chat room like these wonderful folks, please do. It's $5 a month. I only have one level because I'm too lazy to make up five different levels and all kinds of different special things you're going to get. I don't have the energy. $5 a month, supports an educational channel, and you can come to all 8 live shows. I like to have only patrons in the live shows just because it keeps things much more pleasant and under control, and you can be part of our community. All right, that is that. Now let's get to this case. All right, so let me just check in with my folks in the chat room, and then I'll go to who is this wonderful woman who got killed. Oh, everybody is you're also in the UK. All righty. Let's see. I'm just checking to see if there's any other comments before I start. Oh, that's nice. Alyssa says, I just binged a long day of Pat. All right. Maybe I don't know if that's good for you. I don't know. Hi, Benny. Benny's coming in from Denmark. All right. All right. I'm going to go to the story now. Now, there's almost nothing on the internet about this case. I mean, really nothing. There's no books written. There's no documentaries. I was trying to get some in-depth information, and it does not exist. So this also is something very important to understand. Whenever you look at a case, or you're going to the internet, reading a book, whatever, everything depends on the amount of actual information you can get, the facts, the evidence, especially from the police, not from some YouTuber who is telling you this is true, but you don't know if it is. All right. So there's almost nothing on this case except for an autopsy report that I have. That's on the internet. There's no police reports. There's questions I want to know the answers to, and I cannot get them. So I'm going to point that out to you because what you'll see is profilers and analysts, crime people in criminal justice giving opinions on this case to the media based on about this much information. And believe me, I've been there, done that many times in my life. I no longer talk to print media for that reason, because they even just doing regular television, national TV or whatever, they'll throw you before the show, like in an hour, can you be on the show? And they will toss you some reports from the media, and you read them really quickly, and then you give an opinion. And that's what goes out to the public, which is why you got to take everything with a grain of salt. It may be interesting, but don't necessarily believe it, because it may not be actually true. All right, let's go to who this lovely lady was. And I just have to say lovely because, again, she's very low on the victim risk assessment list. Now, this doesn't mean a person who's very high on that list you should not like, okay? But there are people who are heavily involved in dangerous activities, criminal activities, drug activities, prostitution, gangs, cartels. Those put you really high. She was not one of them. There was only one thing that made her risk level go up. And that's the sad part about this case. Let me tell you a little bit about her. All right. So she was in this town. She is 61 years old. She's a pastor, a reverend. And she went to a town on August 23rd, 2009. Her name is Carol Daniels. She drove to the Worthy Temple. And that's this tiny little church. And I don't know if you're familiar with these kind of churches, but I am, because I've spent a lot of time in my past life driving to hospitals to do medical sign language interpreting. And I go through all kinds of corridors of the cities. And I always saw these little small churches. And they look like maybe they took over a house in a neighborhood. They're not fancy. They're very, very basic. They don't have fancy stained glass windows and all that stuff. But what they're trying to do is reach out to the neighborhood, reach out to the people that live there. They're not a big mega church or anything like that. They're barely surviving. And this was one of them. It was called the Worthy Temple. And it was a place called Anadarko, Oklahoma. And she had been there for a decade, presiding over this church, being this church's pastor. All right. Now, let me tell you, Anadarko. This is really important to understand the city that this was all taking place in. Anadarko is a very small location and a rather poverty-struck location. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Where'd it go? I lost it. Oh, maybe I never put it there. Changed my mind. Okay, there's a picture I decided not to use. Okay, Anadarko is a small city about 60 miles south of Oklahoma City. Okay, so, and it was called home to about 6,500 people. By the way, I'm reading this from a site called unresolved.me. And the guy says he's a regular fellow. He's not a profiler or anything, but he does this podcast. And I'm reading it from that site, and I will link that. It's the only site I found reasonable information on. Okay. It's called home to 6,500 people, a number that has slowly been increasing over the decades. Referred to as the Indian capital of the nation, Anadarko is a town with a strong Native American heritage, and agriculture plays a driving force. All right. Now, this is what's interesting about it. From outside, Anadarko appears to be a charming little city, a nice slice of Americana in the heartland of the country. But Anadarko, like most small towns, happen to have secrets, not only poverty, homelessness, and substance abuse, which runs rampant in the region, but seedier, more violent secrets, which are known by very few. He's getting very dramatic here. But in some areas, in some small towns, they've been like ravished by, especially by methamphetamine and stuff like that. And they're kind of a mess. And life is rough there. There's not much work to be had. Drug use is heavy. The cartels are moving into a lot of these locations. So when you get into these areas, they're not the safest areas, shall we say. And even if you're the most good-hearted person and you're coming here to help the population, she was that person. She was absolutely that person. What she would do was by the way, she had let me tell you a little bit more about her. She had a degree in chemistry and biology. She was married and had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Somewhere along the way, they ended up separated or divorced. And she came back to do a master's degree because in education. So she really cared about people. 1990, she was ordained into the Christ Holy Sanctified Churches ministry and would become a member of Oklahoma City's Holy Temple Church. She's very much into, and her passion was religion and her faith. All right. And then, so she was appointed to this little little church way down there in Anadarko, 60 miles south. And she drove this every weekend, a 2-hour round trip to help the people in this area. The church, located just outside of a high crime area in Anadarko, was frequented by mostly minority population, both Native and African Americans that lived in the neighborhood. This is kind of important just because some people have said, was it a hate crime? Probably not, because she was also African American. So were the people coming to the church. So that's not quite that. But she would drive down there and she would go there every weekend, and she would also visit nursing homes to help the elderly. She was just an incredibly nice human being. Incredibly nice. Now, before I go on, I want to give you a little slice of my life as far as knowing what it's like to live in a location where the people are a little sketchy, sketchy, shall we say. And it's one of these areas where there's so many good-hearted people. I have to understand, people don't seem to understand this, that in an area which is a depressed area, a poor area, high welfare count, lot of drug issues and criminals sliding in and out. Within that area, there's also really good people, and they're trying to survive in those areas. My mother-in-law lived in one of those areas in Washington, D.C., and the area that she was in, she was a church lady, and she had so many church friends, and they all came, and they were also really, really wonderful people. And then in the area, there was a high level of criminality. And she did not particularly feel safe in her house. She was concerned about somebody breaking in. She kept hand weights underneath her pillow And she was a strong Jamaican woman, so she could whack them good. Even when she was disabled and hardly ever left her bed, but she could hit people over the head with that sucker. I'm going to assure you. So she would joke about, oh, this guy comes in and, but she was worried about her safety. She was worried about her children's safety. The schools in the area sucked. It was a rough area. Now, after I got married, I moved to California. So my husband could be in a particular program to learn auto mechanics, and he couldn't do it in Washington, D.C. because he was a working man, and they wouldn't accept him into the program. This is a government program. They wouldn't accept him into the program unless he was unemployed. So if you work hard, you can't get into the program, but if you're unemployed, you can. So anyway, we decided we would move to California, become unemployed for a few months, and then you could get into the program that we needed him to get into, which we did. And we lived in Long Beach, California, next to Pacific Coast Highway. And I don't know if anybody understands that area where we lived, but it's low income. And we had an apartment. It was basically a studio apartment, one room with a bathroom and a kitchen, unfurnished for $200 a month, which is a pretty good price. And it was one of these wooden buildings where we were in the street part, and then you go up the wooden stairs, and then there would be some apartments down the way, and then there was our apartment. And I went to labor on that floor because we didn't have furniture yet. And then when I came back, we had my husband had gotten a bed for us, and a single bed, but we all fit on, and and a sofa with a big missing part of it. And anyway, we survived there. We were getting on our feet. But that area, I mean, it was rough. And I remember a day when a woman came out and she was shouting into the street. She's like, "Who stole my stuff?" Somebody had stolen her TV. She goes, "Who stole my TV? Who stole my I think some check she had there. And who stole that check?" It was a welfare check, I think. But anyway, who stole this? And somebody yelled out, "Oh, that's Johnny." And she said, "Oh, really?" And so she goes down the street to Johnny's house, knocks on his door and says, "Hey, Johnny, give me back my stuff." He says, "Oh, okay, I'll give you back your television." I forgot what he kept. It was like a deal. And there was a woman down the way. She would send her son to steal my newspaper every day. I mean, it was a kind of rough place. But there were some really good people there, too, who, when I had a brand new baby, they kept me company and, helped me out, brought me food. I mean, it was rough. Luckily, I didn't stay there more than a year. Then we went on with our lives. But that's the kind of place we're looking at. So it's a place where there's good people, but among those good people, there's some really shady people, and they can be very dangerous. And this is where I think we have to understand what she was walking into. So, good-hearted woman in her 60s, not a target, generally speaking, for anything. She didn't have any particular money coming in here. This church had no money to speak of because they could barely keep anybody. They didn't even have real services because they couldn't get enough people. But she would show up every Sunday in case anybody wanted to come and worship, and she was going to provide that service to them, even with only like 3 or 4 people. What a woman. I mean, she wanted to keep this alive for the community. So she wasn't a good target at all. Older woman, so not necessarily much of a target for a sex offender, not much money in the place, so why would it be robbed? Nice person, help anyone, help the homeless, she'd help anyone. So what the heck? And that's why I want to start this. This should want you to understand she was a good woman who went out of her way to help people in a rough neighborhood. And she'd done it for 10 years and everything was good until that morning. So as I get into the actual crime, I'm just going to check in on comments here. So if anybody has anything to say here before I go into the actual crime, which is pretty horrific. Let's see. That's a good point, Sarah. She has a pattern that if anyone was paying attention or stalking, they could easily catch on to. True. This is very true. She did have a pattern. She was going to show up on Sunday. She usually showed up around 10 o'clock in the morning. And she also left the church unlocked because she was welcoming people to the church. So she left it unlocked and then anybody could come in. And then somewhere around 12, I think, is when she tried to do some kind of service thing, if there was anybody to do it for. But you're correct about that. Linda, Pat. I'm from Long Beach, California. There are certain areas of Long Beach that are low income, but I worked in those areas for years. I love Long Beach. Every city has bad parts. Absolutely. Mind you, Long Beach is a great place. Just where I was, not on a great place. I was at, if you know it, I think it was Walnut Street and Pacific Coast Highway where they intersected. Come back and tell me whether you know that spot. That's so great. But yes, every city has its bad areas, but that's where I lived because I was poor at the time. You know, DC has its great areas too, but where my mother-in-law lived at the time was one of the poor areas, which is why she got the house, I think, for like $30,000. And after she died, my ex-husband sold it for like $400,000 because all the yuppies had moved in. And that's the way life works. And of course, he got the $400,000 after we were divorced. So there goes my $200,000. But yes, Harpa says, I think possibly her kindness and believing the good in people can be very dangerous. Sometimes the good-heartedness of you and wanting to serve people put you in a situation where the people you serving, 90% may be good people, but the other 10% really don't give a crap and may do you in. And that's a big problem. And it's, you know, in a sense, I don't know how much she knew she was putting herself in a possibly risky situation. But, you know, she was alone in the church. She didn't have other people there with her, which would have been helpful. But, you know, she went through 10 years of it. So she's probably thinking nothing's going to go wrong. Jill says, not a robbery. Good question. So there's a very bizarre crime. And that's why I'm going to do all the profiler things, because it's so interesting. All right. What's this? Pat, we're going to make you wealthier. I don't think so. I'm not going to be one of those million subscriber YouTube channels. And it's okay. I don't need that. But sometimes timing is everything. It's like, oh, man, 25 years I get divorced before mom dies. And then, you know, his mom. And then you get all the money. No. I'm just messing. He actually distributed some of that money to my brothers and sisters-in-law who really didn't need it, and to other people who needed it. So he's not all that bad a guy. Anyway, all right. Let me tell you now. Let's go into the case. Let's go into the case. All right. I'm going to read you from again this unresolved, because the only place I had anything, and I want to read you basically what happened. All right. So Carol's body. She went there at 10 in the morning. Wait a minute. I want to tell you when they showed up there. So on August 23rd, 2009, she drove from Oklahoma City to Anadarko. At 10 o'clock that morning, Carol was spotted arriving at the rather nondescript, no kidding, worthy temple, which was wedged between a home on one side and an auto body shop on the other, with an alleyway. She was actually seen in surveillance footage from the convenience store, the Step and Fetch convenience store across the street, which confirmed she pulled in front of the church at 10 a.m. So we know when she arrived. That's not hidden. It is believed that Carol was preparing for her morning service when an unknown evil made its presence known inside the church. Well, yes. Less than 2 hours after she arrived, at 11:40 a.m., retired Bishop Silky Wilson Jr. and his wife, Julia, arrived at the front door of the church. The elderly couple had plans to meet with Carol that morning and noticed her car in the parking lot of the church, but were disturbed by the locked front door. Again, remember, I said she would go in and leave it unlocked. And, you know, this is what many churches over time have done, which is opening up the church to anybody who wishes to come in and pray and to get some kind of help or whatever. They want to have it open to the public, to the people. So she did that. And they found it locked, which are like, that's not normal for her. And they would unsuccessfully attempt to rouse Carol inside for a few minutes. They knocked on all the doors and nothing happened. They said it was locked. We couldn't open it. We began to knock at the door, knocked on the windows, couldn't get in. We tried for a while. And we decided to go down to the police station, which was half a block away. So this is kind of interesting because somebody went in here and murdered her half a block from a police station. Think about that. You know, that's ballsy. You know. At the Anadarko police station, Silky and Julia Wilson let them know that the door was locked and it was not normal. So they went to go check. So just about afternoon, Officer Burris entered the church from another door on the south side and would quickly find Carol Daniels, or rather, what remained of her, as described. All right, let me show you as described. All right, Carol's body, clearly deceased, but discovered behind her church altar, lying nude in a pool of her own blood. She had visible stab wounds to much of her upper half, primarily her neck and throat, and her head had been nearly removed from the rest of her body. Her arms were outstretched, resembling a cross, and early reports would indicate that her body had been covered in some kind of bizarre chemical substance. Making things even more bizarre, most of her hair had been burned, with her scalp reportedly singed at the time of discovery. And he said this, the guy who found her said this is the most horrific crime he's ever witnessed. All right. That is pretty horrific. All right. Now, let me just show you just for a second here. I carefully have, these are just the autopsy report sketches, and I'm not showing the lower body or her anything below here just because it's YouTube. But I would just want to show you the basics, okay? This is the front of her body. You will see that her throat has been cut. You will see damage to the left breast area, the left chest breast area, lots of gashes there. The hands are her left hands. The one closest is the inside of her left hand. The other one is the outside of her left hand. And then this is her from the back. She's got slashes and stab wounds to the neck area there. And these are her right hands, which aren't as damaged as the left hands, the inside and the outside. Okay, that's basically what happened to her. So most of the damage was up here. I think she had a scrape on the knee, but that's quite unimportant. Found entirely nude, lying out like this, hair singed off, and some what's called it's a weird name. Let me see if I got the name of it correctly again. Hold on a second. Let me find the stuff. What they said was around her body, which is one of the interesting issues here, which I'm not comfortable with not knowing actual information about. And hold on a second, let me see if I can find it. Crap. I knew I was going to mess up something here. I had this. Hold on a second. Hopefully, I'll find it along the way. The substance that was around her body, which there's disagreements on what they think the substance was used for. I'm trying to find the exact term of it. Hold on, see if I can find the exact term. Hold on. I got to find it here. I thought it was in this particular article, but I don't see it in here. It's a chemical term, so that's why I was trying to find it. But anyway, she's found that way. Now, the question is, what happened to her? So, just on curiosity, just what do you think? While I'm trying to scurry around trying to find what I think it is. Okay, Michaela is saying she knew her killer as it was a personal attack. How do you know that, Michaela? What tells you it's a personal attack? And why? Why would somebody personally attack her? What would be the point? Okay. Let's see. Okay. Everybody says rage killing, overkill, psychopath who hates women in the church. All right. See, now we're trying to, we see now the interesting is rage killing and overkill. What exactly is that? Yeah, that's a funny term. It's a proper term, everybody. I'm not complaining about your terminology. But a lot of times we say that. But where's the line between this is what I did because I found it necessary at the time, and this is what I didn't need to do. So and what is overkill? Because overkill, I think, in the minds of most of us is like 1 stab is killing, 2, 3, 4 stabs is overkill. I don't know that we know what is overkill. And sometimes it has a lot to do with when people's concept of how much time things take place in. I think overkill is something that required a lot of time and unnecessary stuff, and not just enough to commit the crime and get the hell out of there. So we're going to examine some of that. Oh, that's interesting. Kelly says it's a woman killer. Okay, I want to know why you think that. So this is going to be kind of like an open profiling class here, because there's very little information here to heavily profile. But I'm interested in seeing where all of you come in on this, because it's fascinating. It's a woman killer. Kelly, why do you say it's a woman killer? So if I ask you a question, you feel free to come back in and try to think what you think it is. Okay, Christlike, sort of with the arms outstretched. There is the belief that because it was like this was a crime, that they were attacking a religion or mocking her or whatever. I'll get to that because there's a really great statement on that. Interesting. Sarah, I don't think the church matters outside of the time and opportunity it provided. Interesting. I know I like that, Sarah. I think this is one of the things that it's extremely important in profiling, that sometimes we can over-focus on something because it happened there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that actually had anything to do with it. So you're pointing that, well, it could just be a place. She was alone. It was isolated for whatever reasons. It was just a place that had opportunity. And very interesting. I'm going to get back to that one. Good stuff, Sarah, on that one. Let's see. Interested in, okay. See, Allison, this is what I'm trying to get. Interested in to know the chemical used. Okay, hold on one second. I got to go back here again. I had this here, and for some reason it vanished on me. Of course, everything vanishes on me. I'm going to put in Carol Daniels chemical and see if I can pull it up. I'm just looking for the terminology they used with it, because they never did. There we go. I found it. Okay. Investigators say her killer methodically sprayed a dissolving chemical around her body in an effort to destroy DNA. Now, what is a dissolving chemical? Do we have any chemists in the group? Because I did research this. I just forgot the term dissolving chemical. Does anybody know what a dissolving chemical is? Let's see if we got anybody. Yeah. CJ, that is a theory that the investigators have. And again, we have to, the thing that Sarah said about just because it's in a church doesn't mean it has to do with the church. Just because you use a chemical doesn't mean you're trying to dissolve DNA. You could be, but are you? That's the next question. So it's okay. Let's see. You make a lot of assumptions based on, I don't know what she may like. Everybody is making assumptions. So the whole point of when you're starting to do profiling is you're trying to look at the possibilities. Let's not call them assumptions. Let's call them possibilities, because that's where you start. If you think that profiling is you look at something and go, well, I know what happened there. 5 minutes later, you're done. Do you know how many days when you all suggest a case to me, I'm lying in bed at night, which is why I'll probably die early from Alzheimer's. But they say you need a good night's sleep. I wake up at 2 a.m. going, why was she in the church? Could it be the church? What about the dissolving agent? I am questioning everything. And I am not assuming, but coming up with possibilities, which I run through my head over and over again to decide, are those possibilities more probable or less probable? That's how any investigator works, until you can say, wait a minute, this makes more sense than this. That's why I say profiling is not an absolute. Anybody who says that is just full of it. And they want you to believe that they have some kind of magical sense, which they do not. Okay. I'm not sure what that means, but okay. Mockery of holy water and ashes. That's interesting. Something put around the body and then the burning could be that's probably, again, if we're thinking about this as entirely a crime based on the church and her being in the church, why, the question would really be, why would this is not a fancy church. This is not somebody who's been, preaching to the thousands. This woman probably gives food to a few homeless people and goes down to the nursing home and pats people on the head. I mean, we're not talking about somebody who's really pushing a lot of stuff. So she's an odd person to choose to make your more religious point. Just seems kind of pointless. So I have trouble. Malic acid causes DNA damage. The question would be, one of the questions would be, what would the person have with them? So you have to ask this question. They come in here. So now there's two possibilities: premeditated or not that premeditated. If it's premeditated, yes, a person could say, I'm going to wait here for her. I'm going to do this to her. I brought along some special stuff to get rid of all. That's pretty fancy. Or was it they used something they had with them or that they found within the church? Could be even something like bleach. So I looked up this point about what is called dissolving chemical. And it is really hard to find a definition of dissolving chemical. Let me try again. Definition of dissolving chemical. Come on, give me something here. They have definitions of dissolving. Solutions. Dissolving is when the solute breaks up from a larger crystal molecules into smaller crystals. Okay, that really works. Let's see. Things with. I feel like I'm doing one of these some of these game shows. Things with dissolving chemicals. Give me something. Frick. Chemistry for kids. Okay. Soft drinks. Oh my God. It's a dissolving solution. Probably wiped out a whole bunch of my innards. Hydrogen, rubbing alcohol. It's really hard to find anything about this, but I have found some other stuff. So I will get acetone. Okay, hydrogen, many forms, solvents, but we're talking about what you could bring along with you or find in the location. So that's the real question. All right. What? You're in Santorini? Wow. Hi Santorini. Missing your blue and white. Beautiful place. Beautiful place. Did you ride the donkeys up the slope, or do they not allow donkey riding anymore? Okay. Linda says, where did the dissolving agent come from? Could she have been cleaning the church and the dissolving agent left by the victim? Yes. So it's a possibility. I don't know whether this is where it gets very frustrating. You don't have a police report. You don't have all the details about, yes, we know she goes to church every weekend, but so what? Who's in the church the rest of the week? Does anybody clean the church? What does a police report say? What did the police get from the people in the neighborhood? We don't know, because that's not on the internet. And this is one of the things I point out. It's hard to analyze crimes when you're missing a whole bunch of information. All right, let me tell you a little bit more about some of this stuff. All right, so let's see, where was it at? Hold on, I gotta find where I'm at here. Okay. The autopsy report notes several injuries perpetrated upon Carol, which included a large number of incisions across her neck, which severed her trachea and front neck muscles. This had likely been her cause of death, with the other bodily injuries obtained post-mortem, but had been severe enough. Now, again, likely is a bad word. What does likely mean? Now, when you go you got post-mortem stuff, right? The question is, how do you distinguish between before and after? Now, there are ways to distinguish when enough time has passed and the body is going through certain stages, and then you see somebody do some cutting or stabbing. things don't bleed and other things don't happen properly. And then you go, wow, that was done way after the person was dead. But this is a little gray line where did they do it right before or right after? And that gets really tricky. And when they say likely, I don't know what the heck that means. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Likely been a cause of death with other bodily injuries obtained post-mortem, but had been severe enough to the point of nearly decapitating her. She had also sustained at least 12 stab wounds to her chest and lower neck area, extending across her shoulder, numerous cuts and superficial wounds across her face, chest, abdomen, and back. Defensive wounds on both of her hands, contusions to her right arm and left knee, and burns to her scalp with her hair having been singed off. Surprisingly, there seemed to be no signs of sexual assault. At least there was no sexual trauma reported in the medical examiner's report, which might not have told the entire story. Okay, let me grab that. I have that in front of me here, the entire report. Okay, not one of the better autopsies I've ever seen. People think all autopsies are like, wow, that's what an autopsy report is. All depends who did it. This autopsy report was done by whom? I'm trying to figure out who did this. It's from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, so I think it would be halfway decent. It says here, I remember something that really bothered me in the autopsy report. Let me see if I can find it, because I was bugged by it. Okay, pictures. Yeah. It was very hard for me to determine exactly how deep the cuts were. There's some little notations by the cuts, but I can't really see it. Usually, in my opinion, at least I remember, and all the ones I've looked at, what you'll see is when they describe the... Okay, here's the description of the wounds. She talks about some incised, I don't know, he or she. Head with 3 cuts over the left eyebrow. Neck has incised wounds, which usually means this way. 6 cuts this way and 7 cuts that way. Left chest, left hand. What? I'm not happy with it. Let me put it that way. I'm just not happy with it. I can't quite tell what I'm looking at. When the description just isn't good enough for me. I like to know exactly. If you're going to say an incised wound, I want to know where it started. I want to know how long it is. If you're going to say it's a stab wound, I want to know how deep it is. I don't get this from this report. I'm just not fond of it. So, was she stabbed up and slashed up a lot? Yes. Mostly in this region here, from here to here. Okay. No sign of sexual assault. So that's interesting. Now, just because there's no sign of sexual assault does not, again, here we have to look at all the possibilities. She was in a church, maybe it has nothing to do with the church. No sign of sexual assault. Does that mean it couldn't be a sexual assault? No, it doesn't. There are ways to commit a sexual assault which do not leave evidence. And that could be for a whole bunch of reasons. To look at them, sometimes there's not DNA left with an oral sexual assault. Sometimes a vaginal assault, there's no DNA left either, or any sign of any kind of trauma, especially if the guy's like this big. She's like, "Are you raping me?" Because I can't really tell. I know that's probably a crude thing to say, but it's true. So that doesn't mean that. And then if the guy doesn't ejaculate, doesn't leave semen even in small amounts, maybe just doesn't show up. Or some guys like to do what they do and then jack off someplace else over the body or with a cloth later on. It doesn't mean it's not sexual because there's no sign of sexual assault. So we have to again keep that in mind. Could it have been a sexual assault? She was nude. And somebody, not only was she nude, somebody then took all her clothing away, which is very bizarre. A lot of times you'll find a nude body like in the bushes, but the reason the nude body is in the bushes is because the guy was like raped her in a van, and then he opened up the van's slide door and just chucked her out, and he drove off with the clothes. But in this situation, her clothes were on her, and then in the church, somebody had to literally take those clothes and carry them out of the church. Why didn't they just leave the clothes there? What was the purpose of taking the clothes? That's a very unusual. That is one of the most unusual things about this crime I think I've seen in a long time. Along with the fact that supposedly this solvent or whatever, a dissolving thing, had been supposedly, and again, here's another problem, around her body. What does that mean? I would like to see the forensics report on when you're going to say this particular dissolving agent was around her body. What do you mean by that? How much of it? Or is somebody exaggerating? Is there was it all over her skin? Like every bit of her was covered with this stuff? Was there did you find something around her body and a couple little patches? Did you find it in her hair? Where did you find the crap? But we have no information on that. I don't know whether that's an exaggeration, or maybe they did some swabs and they came up with some dissolving agent and said, "Oh my God, the person's trying to get rid of DNA." Are we talking about this much? And they're exaggerating it, and it's not really true? I don't know, because there's no information on that at all, and that's very frustrating. If you're trying. That's why, again, when you're looking at a case from outside the police department and you're not working with them, you are missing a lot of information. So that's why, again, educational channel. I can't say absolutes because I don't have the evidence in front of me. I don't have even the reports in front of me. So I have the autopsy reports there. I don't love it, but at least it's there. And then we have this hair singed off, which that seems pretty big. Hair doesn't just go on fire unless somebody does something with it, right? But the solvent or the dissolving agent, whatever it is that they don't know, they don't say what it is. If they said it was bleach she was cleaning the floor with, that would make sense. Or again, check this out. What would happen if she was cleaning the floor and somebody came and attacked her and the thing fell over and poured bleach around her? Doesn't mean that the criminal did that, the killer did that. Could have just mean it happened. Again, you have to be very careful about jumping into conclusions. We can come up with possibilities, but not conclusions. I want to check on a little bit more before I go to some of the profiler stuff, which is very interesting. Let's say bleach, acids and bases, drain cleaner. That's an interesting one. Maybe she just brought some cleaning supplies. She might have. They don't say anything about that. No donkeys left. I think they canceled the donkeys there because it was considered abusive to the donkeys. So nail polish remover is sometimes used to remove graffiti. Very interesting, Leslie. That's very interesting. Not this place. This place, I don't think has got a janitor. It doesn't even have any people going to there. They don't really have even people attending service. This is basically an abandoned building which she comes to once on the weekend to try to reach out to the people in the community. Sometimes there's not even enough people to even have a service. So I'm going to say janitors. Maybe somebody in the community would come in. Maybe. Let's see. You don't have a security guard at a church that has only 3 people attending. Yeah, a janitor would know when she was coming and going, but I just don't think we're talking about, there's so few people in this church that I don't know how often they even bother to clean it. I mean, we're talking about, I say, close to an abandoned building, but that may be one of the issues with this whole case. Oh, no. As far as security guards go, as I always point out, security guards, number 1 job of serial killers. Yeah, but that doesn't mean this has anything to do with a serial killer. Dude was in a mad frenzy, maybe. Yes, that's true. Exactly. It is one of the number 1 jobs. Hey, Sarah. Hey, did you learn that from me or did you find that out someplace else? I've been I've been ragging on that for years, and it just because it's true. All right. Let's see here. Doesn't seem sexually motivated. Okay. This person, that could be a killer lesbian, and it could be. I mean, there are female serial killers who are committing sexual crimes against both females and males. Can happen. Yep. Crime of rage. Sarah's in the crime of rage. Okay, we're gonna put that one. We're gonna pin that on. Crime of rage. The killer left her naked to humiliate her. That's possible. Again, we're talking about possibilities here because we don't have a lot of information. Why would so the question here is, here's an interesting question. All right, here's another example. You find a woman in her bed and she has been strangled and raped. She is naked. Okay. Clothes strewn across the floor. Okay, let me take that back. Let's say she's stabbed. No sign of sexual assault, but she's naked, clothes strewn across the floor. What does that tell you about the crime scene? What does that crime scene tell you? Let's go there. Woman found in bed, naked, totally naked. She's been strangled, stabbed, or whatever. They don't see a sign of sexual assault, but doesn't mean it didn't happen. Clothes strewn across the floor. What does that tell you might have happened? What are your possibilities on that? Because we're talking about it. Let's see. Anybody have a thought on that? What does her nakedness mean? The woman she's in bed, been stabbed to death or whatever. What does her nakedness mean? In the scheme of profiling a crime. Sexually motivated. Well, could be. Let's see what else we have here. Sexually motivated is possible. Humiliation, possible. On display. We're all talking about the girl in the bed. I'm not talking about this crime. I'm talking about just generality. I'm hoping somebody gets this one. Are you talking about the girl? Everybody, I'm only talking about the girl in the bed, not this crime. The girl in the bed is found strangled or stabbed. She's naked, her clothes strewn across the floor. What does that crime scene tell you? What does that crime scene tell you? So the woman in the bed, I'm going to go through this again because I think it's really, really important. Sexual, okay. Okay, that's an interesting point. Started consensually. I like this, Alyssa. You're going outside the box. See, most people see a naked woman in a bed and they immediately assume it's a serial killer who has raped and murdered her. Now you're saying maybe it started consensually and then went out of hand. So it may not be a serial killer. That's a good one. All right. Someone that knew her because she's naked in a bed. Post because she's naked in a bed. I'm trying. Thank you, Ari Berry. That's the answer I was looking for. See, this is where things can go wrong. Was she already naked? Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. All right. Was she already naked? Some people sleep in the nude. They're more comfortable that way. They're already naked. Nobody made them naked. They're just already naked. What about the clothes strewn across the room? What do you say about that? Yeah. Was she just sleeping naked? What about the clothes strewn across the room, though? What about the clothes strewn across the room? Her clothes just tossed across the room. She's messy. Exactly. She's messy. She's a slob. She's untidy. Yes, exactly. This is where you have to come in to not jump to conclusions. I mean, I personally don't know anything about sleeping nude and having my clothes on the floor. Maybe, but yes, people sleep naked. Sometimes they go to bed, they just rip the clothes off and chuck them on the floor. Not everybody's a nice, neat, and tidy person. Puts everything in the laundry hamper or whatever they do. So you find a naked woman with clothes thrown on the floor. It doesn't mean a serial killer disrobed her. So this is the problem. Now, of course, she's in a church. Now we'll go back to the church. She's in a church. I doubt she was getting naked in the church. She wasn't sleeping. So we can take that out. But I'm just using that as an example to try to understand why certain things could be the way they are. They're not necessarily as we believe. She was found naked. Her clothes were taken. There's no sign of sexual assault. It doesn't mean it wasn't a sexually motivated crime. But on the other hand, being nude doesn't mean it was a sexually motivated crime. She could have had the clothes removed for purposes of humiliation. They could have been removed to eliminate evidence because somebody touched them and didn't want maybe they bled and they didn't want the blood on her clothes. So they just took everything with them. That's possible. There's one more thing that's really, really important. It's also possible for why humiliation, removing evidence. There's one more. I want to point out the one more. What do you think? What's the one more? Found behind an altar. Yes, she was found supposedly. So I don't even know how big the altar was. There was something about she was near a door. So I don't even know how accurate that is at all. But there's another reason. Yeah. Okay. That's possible. Oh, I'm sorry. Clothes were taken because killers afraid there would be DNA. Hatred could be a cross-dressing killer. Well, there you go. There's an interesting one. Nobody's come up with it, but they were worried. That actually is an interesting concept. I don't know. See, this is another thing we don't know. We have no idea what she was wearing that day. Now, there was a person seen fleeing the location on a camera that was really shabby. And let me show you the great picture. So on the right, that's supposedly the person. This person was supposedly in white running. I don't know what she wore that day. If she wore all white, maybe they did exchange clothes because I didn't. Who knows? That could be another project. Let's see. Trophy. Possibly. Trophies are not usually the person's entire clothing. I mean, it's a lot of stuff to take. They were poor. You know what? That's not actually an entirely ridiculous thing to say, Alyssa, even though you probably thought it wasn't when you said it. But other people going, wow, just because they're poor, they take her clothes. People do strange things. I think, oh, why? Now she's already dead. They could really use these things. It's not impossible. So you got to keep that up. Disguised. Yep. Could be disguised. And there's one more, oh, that's a good point too. Posing her. If they were posing her, they might want to take off her clothes so they can pose her nude. So it would be more fascinating to see her that way. I haven't seen one person come up with this one yet. And I'm curious whether they're going to, because this is not uncommon and could be the possibility here. Resellers. About 2 hours later, you could have bought her clothes like a few blocks away. Oh, thank you, TR. Misdirection. Staging. Now, we're going to take a look at this because if somebody committed this crime and it was a crime of robbery or rage, and they didn't want people to look their direction, ripping off the woman's clothes and leaving her naked is staging. Misdirection, so that when you see this, you think, oh my God, it's a serial killer. It's a rapist. Clearly the woman's nude. It has to be a sexual crime. Misdirection, staging is very common in something like this, where you think you might be looked at, which is interesting because if this is staging, then the person is likely somebody close by in some way. Now, oftentimes it's like a husband, or husbands often will play make it look like a serial killer game because they don't want to be looked at as the husband's going to be the first looked at. But if it looks like a serial killer got her, they stage looking like, they'll do things like make her nude, put her legs apart, and make it look like something serial killer like. But other people will also stage something like that if they know they're never going to be looked at as a serial killer. Well, might as well make it look like a serial killer crime. Therefore, they won't look at me. So it would either be somebody close to her or somebody in the vicinity who the police are half a block away going, it's probably that one. That doesn't mean this was a staged crime. This is one possibility that we're going to take a look at. One possibility. So let me go to some of the other thinking on the crime, which I find really fascinating. Okay, let's see what I got here. Here we have the unnatural position. They wouldn't disclose exactly what time. They wouldn't exactly talk about how her arms were laying out, but okay. All right, let's go on to this one. They canvassed the neighborhood, looking for potential witnesses, attempting to scour the interior and exterior of the church for clues. Unfortunately, nobody in the neighborhood seemed to have seen much, and a search of the area would come back with very little physical evidence. Carol's clothing was missing from the crime scene, was believed to have been taken along with her briefcase and purse, which she had taken with her that morning. So there is a possible robbery issue here. Okay, now somebody will say, well, because she was in a kind of crappy church, you know what I mean? Why would she bring a ton of money? Certainly people who can barely afford to eat are not leaving lots of money in the old dish, you know what I mean? So this is not a church you want to rob. It's kind of strange, but it doesn't mean that they didn't think she had something worth stealing. And you have to understand that people who are really desperate will kill somebody over $10. Always keep that in mind, because there's been many people who've been killed over $10. And then the question is, what the heck? But that's not a question, it's a statement. But what the heck? It's just $10. Well, I needed $10 to get my drugs or whatever. So it can happen. Before leaving, however, the killer or killers had covered her nude body with a chemical substance which was administered to destroy any potential DNA evidence. Now, I don't know if that I think that just came from the dude who's the guy who says, I'm a regular guy. This is my website. This is where he's making up stuff, which is not proven. There's no proof that that dissolving chemical had anything to do with that person trying to remove DNA evidence. It could be, but we don't know. All right. Let's see. It is unknown what kind of chemical the unsub had used. When anybody says unsub, they spend way too much time reading FBI profiler books. I always say killer. Unsub means that it's an unidentified subject, which is something the FBI came up with, but I never hear that outside of the FBI. I don't even know if the FBI uses it that much, but it's one of those terms that became sort of popular at a certain time. I just call it the killer, because we haven't identified him. I don't give him a name. It's just a killer or killers. So he's Mr. Regular Fella is calling it an unsub. Let's see, unsub had used. They didn't know what kind of chemical it was, whether it was something they had brought with them or something they might have found at the scene, like bleach or another cleaning chemical. But it would prove to be effective. Police were not able to recover much of anything from Carol's body. Now, I don't know. I don't know what tests they did on her body. And there's not always DNA found in somebody's body, depending on how it all goes down. All right. It was August, so I'm not going to say anybody is going to be dressed in a big, huge fat coat and a hat and gloves. But just because there's no evidence on the body doesn't mean that there couldn't have been. It's just they didn't find it. He doesn't know what chemical was used. The police have never determined that. Oh, no, the police have never stated that, or it hasn't gone into the media. Now, being a non-chemist, my question is, were they ever able to determine exactly what chemical it was? Or is it just something so, like the chemical itself that they found could be one of 10 different kinds of, substances. It could be bleach. It could be this. It could be that. Is it just so many of them and they can't identify the exact thing? I don't know. I don't know how the tests are done, and it's never been stated. So we do not know what the substance was that was on her body, although we also do not know if it was used to get rid of DNA, because there's no evidence of that. I don't know if they say it's a drop, if it was a bucket full, whole body, just her hand. I just don't know what it even means. All right. Now, this guy says trying to kill DNA at the scene. Okay, now, Brent Turvey, I'm going to get into Brent Turvey in a second, a criminal profile and adjunct professor at Oklahoma City University, would later tell the Oklahoman the taking of the clothes was not done for a trophy, but was rather a practical act. The use of dissolving spray was also a practical act. Okay, now, I agree with him. Nobody takes the entire set of clothing for a souvenir. Some other reason for it. He's saying that the dissolving agent, I don't know why he says spray. How does he know it was a spray? I don't know that he was working for the Oklahoma City Police Department at that point. Anybody in that, it wasn't working for I don't know who the police department was that worked on this. I think I had it in, hold on a second. Who was it? It was, it does say Oklahoma City here. So maybe it was Oklahoma City that took over. But I don't know how he'd know it was a spray. I think that's fascinating. I don't know if he heard that from somebody or when the media called him and they said, "Hey, Mr. Turvey, what do you think?" And he goes, "Well, it could be some spray." And they quoted that, or maybe he didn't even say that, but they quoted that. That's why I don't talk to the media, do these print interviews, because I always get misquoted and stuff I put in there is ridiculous. But I agree with him totally on the clothing thing. And I'm going to do a further thing on his theories later on. So now I'm going to get to some other theories. All right. Now this is Mr. Regular Guy from the link I'm going to put in here. This is a non-profiler's viewpoint. I just want to comment on it because it's interesting. All right. The killer or killers seem to have a very narrow window of time to carry out this crime, less than 2 hours. Whew, 2 hours is not a small amount of time. Since everybody got really upset that I use real knives like Britney Spears. So how long does it take to start counting? Okay, I'm done. Now that's done in 5 minutes or less, and I got an hour and 55 minutes to do what? Take her clothes off? Run away? That's a lot. 2 hours is a huge amount of time. Huge. So I just found that amusing. Instead, and did not seem to kill Carol most quickly or efficiently. I thought they did a pretty good job. I mean, I didn't look that on. It was all here to here. There's some stabs and cuts and a few more, but again, it's done so quickly. So this guy will say that instead they butchered her to death and took great pains to cover up their crime. Really? What were the great pains? Okay. So first of all, they didn't butcher her. They stabbed and cut her. You can call it butchering if you like, but that's just a fancy term for the 5 minutes worth of work they did. They went to great things to cover up the crime. We don't know that. The clothes were taken. We don't know that had anything to do with getting rid of evidence. This dissolving agent, we don't even know what that was. We don't know why it was on her. And the issue of the hair that was burned off. Was that done to cover up something? Because generally speaking, burning up somebody's hair is not really getting rid of DNA evidence. So I don't know that there was a huge cover up of the crime either. Again, this is where you jump to conclusions. Considering is one thing, but jumping is another. They destroyed what evidence that could be left behind. Burning her hair. Again, I don't know why her hair is evidence, but okay. Yeah, I can't even come up with a good reason for that. And pouring chemicals all over her body. We don't know that anybody poured chemicals all over her body. We just know that there was some kind of dissolving chemical of some sort somewhere. Now, we heard that it was around her body. Now you're saying it's on her body. See, this is where you start playing with words and not coming up with actual facts. So I like the rest of his stuff because it's got information, but this is mostly nonsense. And this is where really nice guys who do crime scene reporting on the internet and give a good story might want to stop with the analysis part. And they left with their clothing and personal belongings. That is true. They also might have intentionally reconfigured her body into a Christ-like pose. They might have. At least they put might. Nothing about that. Nothing about any of this screams robbery to me. It seems like a highly charged, sadistic killer who came in prepared to carry out this murder, which there's zero proof of. So now this fellow is saying it's a premeditated murder. I'm going to get her. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to torture her, make her humiliate her, put her in the sign of a cross, and it's whatever it is. It's some kind of premeditated statement. But that's in the brain of the person who's doing the analysis, whether it be a profiler or a non-profiler. All right, let me look at somebody else. All right, let's look at this Dr. William Mannion. I have never heard of this guy, but it's okay because he might be very well known someplace else, just not in my own head. A forensic pathologist and deputy medical examiner. And when they say that, this means this is where the media just calls up everybody on a long list and tries to get somebody to talk to them. I'm often on that list. All right. Believed that due to the level of trauma inflicted upon Carol, that the motive was incredibly emotional or personal. A lot of violent crimes have nothing to do with emotion, or neither are they personal. Some people just like stabbing up people. And, psychopaths, some of their emotion is simply, you didn't do what I wanted to do. It doesn't mean that they were like involved with the person, connected to them, no, the bitch made me do it is one of the best statements I've heard from a number of psychopaths. I don't know. I'll put that in one of those. Yeah, I'm going to have to put that in one of what are those little shorts? So he didn't believe it was robbery, indicating he did not believe that the motive for this crime was robbery or something similar, indicating that the killer was known to the victim. There is zero indication that this person was known to the victim. There just isn't. I don't know where you get that from. Now, could the person be known? Yes. Probably not the estranged ex-husband. I don't even know where the husband is. Probably not one of her kids. But, somebody could theoretically have followed her to that church from Oklahoma City to do her in. She could have a boyfriend in town. She could have just made friends with some local people who then came after her. All of that's true, but there's just no evidence of it. You can say that, but this is where profiling goes wrong. I can't say that because I do not know. I have not one shred of evidence that she knew the person that killed her. Now, she may have met the person that killed her, but I don't know if she had a relationship. I don't know. In the case of robbery, he's not going to hang around and keep slashing at her, stabbing at her over and over and take time to stage the body. We don't know that the body was staged. We don't. Just because, the body's naked, is that the staging? Are we talking about the arms out, which is not necessarily staging? And Brent Chervy will get to that in a minute. They wouldn't stick around. Right? Some thieves are really nasty people. There's a lot of crimes that roll over on each other. So that's why burglars are often also rapists, because they like to burgle people's places because it's enjoyable for them to get into their houses and take their stuff. But it's also nice to rape them at the same time. Sometimes they just roll over. You have 2 or 3 different kinds of things going on in the head at the same time. So somebody could have come in there to rob her. I'm going to grab, hey, I saw her walk in there with a purse. I'm going to get that purse. Maybe she said, hey, no, you can't have my purse. And then the bitch made him do it. And then he staged something. He took her clothes so it wouldn't be thought of as a robber. So he took her clothes, made it look like a sexual crime and ran off. Who knows? Could be a woman. And I'll get to that in a minute. All right. So anyway, let's go to Jack Levin. I actually know Jack Levin, not personally, but I know he's been around for a long time. Jack Levin, a professor of sociology and criminology at Northeastern University, would state that he believed this to be a killer that was seeking attention. Oh, Lord. I don't know. Again, this is the media, and they called him, and he did a 30-minute interview, and he said it's possible that he was seeking attention, and they just cut off the possible and said he's seeking attention. Because they mess up your words. They do. They're so frustrating. So then I say, oh, Jack Levin said this, and I disagree. And now Jack Levin's gone, sitting in his house going, oh, Pat, I never said that. That's not exactly what I said. So I honestly don't know. But he believed that this killer to be one that was seeking attention, citing the staging of the body, which he deemed highly unusual, even for a gruesome murder case. Again, we're talking about this, and we don't know that that's true. And believe that the symbolic posing might be a signature of the killer. Something that could be used to link this crime to others. Oh, good Lord. So now we're getting to signature stuff, which I don't like very much. Signature, let me go through this again. MO, method of operation or modus operandi. Something you do to commit the crime because you need to do it. Like you hold a gun to somebody's head because you need them to give you the money. But then after they give you the money, you whack them over the head. Is that signature that you didn't need to do anymore, but you liked hitting them with the gun and knocking them out? Or was it you didn't want a witness or the guy to run after you, so you hit him? Sometimes motive, MO, and signature, it's all in the mind of the person analyzing. There was a case, and I think it was a Douglas case. I'm trying to remember this, where I may get all of this wrong, but I'm going to tell you the basic scenario so you can understand how you can confuse it. So this guy goes in to this house, and this couple is there, and he's going to rape the woman. So what he does is he let me see, how does this work? I'm trying to remember who he had the teacup on. somebody, I think maybe it was the guy, and he's going to rape the woman and puts a teacup on the butt. And as the person lying on the ground, puts a teacup on their butt, like on a little teacup, saucer and a cup. The idea that while I'm doing this in this other room, if I hear that teacup and plate fall off your butt, I will kill her. And I don't know if I got the story right at all. It's been a long time since I read this one. So the idea was that it was said that the teacup and the saucer was a signature. And I said, no, it's MO to me. MO is because, it was a way for him to be able to do what he wanted to do and not keep the guy controlled. And if it fell off, he'd hear the smash and he'd know, that the guy was, moving. But just because it's an oddity that you put a teacup on somebody's butt doesn't mean it's a signature. Like, oh, I did this. I didn't need to do it. It was cool. But could the guy just decide it looked funny to have a teacup on somebody's butt? Sure. But you have to be very careful on what is signature and what is MO. So a person lying there like this does not necessarily mean that's a signature, that they left the person in that position to talk about, it's a thing about anti-Christians or something. And then therefore you want to look around the whole country finding people lying like this, which you never find. So, as if it's going to link to a whole bunch of crimes. It's just, most of that's nonsense. Then he said, he's speaking to the Connecticut-based Hartford Courant, he stated, which is unfortunate for him. He spoke to them. The killer poses the bodies because he wants credit. That's if the bodies are posed. He intends to do it again and again and wants credit for what he has done. I've seen very few cases outside of Hollywood that have a person so obviously posed that it's the same killer. That is so incredibly, incredibly rare. That's one of those profiling mythologies has been going on forever. You see it in movies all the time. It's like, like Jack the Ripper, and then Boston Strangler, you got a bow around their neck. And most of them didn't have bows around their neck, but okay. But you put a bow around every girl's neck and then you take credit. Every time you find a girl with a bow around her neck, I did it. It's almost non-existent. I mean, I'm not saying there weren't a couple cases in history where somebody did similar things. I remember one guy who did pose some women by the side of the highway in a kind of a very sexual pose. That was one of the rare ones, but most of the time that doesn't happen. And this guy posing bodies is rarely done. And oftentimes when it's done, it's just done one time because it's a hoot. Like Danny Rowling did this with one of the girls where he put her head up on a shelf facing the door. So when the police came in, that's what they saw and they freaked out. He thought that was pretty funny, and they would take pictures of that and he'd know it goes down in history. He did enjoy doing that. He did stage it, pose, but he didn't cut anybody else's head off and put him on the same position. It only happened that one time. So that's not really something. That's why he's doing it. He wants credit for what he's done. The killer wants the notoriety. He knows that by staging the victim's body, it'll freak out a population of people and terrify them. Sometimes that's true if it's like the Danny Rowling thing where your head is sitting on a shelf. Yes, but this, we don't even know that the body was staged. Not with the arms. I'm more likely to think it's staged by taking off the clothes to make it look like a sexual homicide. I'm more likely to think that was staging, but staging not for notoriety, but staging to throw the police off the trail. So that's what he said. All right, now I want to get to Gebirth. All right, Gebirth. This is Vernon Gebirth. Sorry. One of the best books ever written, called Practical Homicide Investigation. When I put my little school together and I'm recommending books, this is one of them. This book it's like the Bible for doing investigations for homicide. And Gebirth has been around a really long time. Excellent, excellent book. And I recommend that to everybody. Any detective should have this on their shelf. All right. Who is Gebirth? So then here comes Gebirth, retired lieutenant commander of the NYPD, who brought with him more than 40 years of law enforcement experiences and authored numerous books about homicide investigation, tactics, procedures, and forensic techniques. All good. Gebirth believed that whenever bodies are intentionally posed by a killer, the primary motivation for the killers to have done so is related to a sexual fantasy. Okay. So now he's disagreeing with the other guy who says it's done for notoriety. He's saying it's done for sexual gratification. See, now we're already seeing disagreements. The primary motivation for the killer to have done so is related to a sexual fantasy of some kind. If the body was posed, I can state unequivocally, it's extremely rare circumstances. That is true. Less than 1% of all homicides present sexually posed victims. That is also true. Extremely rare. Danny Rowling was one of them. Just trying to remember the people that actually did this. Darlene Krashuk, the case I did another video on. When I was analyzing that case, I was told that she was posed. And I'm like, she wasn't posed. She was chucked out of a van and she just landed that way. Sometimes posing is not actually what happened. People see the body and it's shocking and they think, oh, that's posed. If the body ends up in positions where the legs are spread apart or there's something, interesting, they assume it's posed when it's not necessarily so. Despite the belief that this crime was sexual in nature, Okay, I don't know that this was sexual in nature. Solidified in Gebirth's mind by the mutilation of the victim's breast. All right. She had stab wounds. Yes, here, gash. That's also where the heart is. It's always useful to know that a lot of times reasons this happens here is because of the heart. Now, if nipples are excised off, or there's a picarism type thing around, like around the nipple area or something, that is clearly sexual. The stabbing in the breast is not necessarily sexual. It's just the darn heart is under that thing when you're a female. Okay, now here's interesting. He does believe that it's possible to have been committed by someone looking to disguise their true motive. In this case, the killer would be aware that the posing and mutilation of the body would make it look more symbolic than it was and would indicate some knowledge of the investigative tactics. But based on the crime itself, Gebirth doubted this was the case. Okay, so now Gebirth is saying, okay, maybe if her body was nude, it was a staging. If this was meant to look like a serial killer, it's staging. And this might be staging to throw the police off of who did it. But then he says, but I don't think so. The presentation of a body, especially that of a clergy person, in a manner suggestive of a crucifixion would lead me to believe the offender had focused his attack on some underlying anger or retribution. Okay, so it could all be all of these things, but I think it'll just be this thing. Just because she's clergy doesn't mean the church had anything to do with it. It's a location. It's a location. Could it be somebody who was angry with the church? Yes. But of all the churches out there, this is like the least likely. That seems very, doesn't seem like the kind of that particular very low-key church is just kind of a quiet little community thing. And a woman who's just doing community stuff hardly seems the type you want to, make your point with. Could it be true? Yes. Okay. So now, let me see here a second. Let's see. This is Gebirth 2. Let me see one more thing about Gebirth here. He said, when an offender removes clothing from a crime scene and then adds chemicals to the crime scene, he or she is obviously looking to thwart the investigation. That's if we know what actual chemicals are used and how they were used. And we don't know why the clothes are removed. The presentation, here we did that one. The last part, the immediate problem I see for criminal investigators that they are not privy to the offender's motivations or his thinking pattern. In all honesty, the devil will be in the details. So he's admitting we can't really get into the head of the killer to the extent which people think profilers can. And Gerberth is 40. He's not a profiler, he's a detective, retired, but he's got 40 years of experience. Even he can't get into the mindset of one particular guy, just one, or a woman, or a couple. They just, you cannot do that. What you have to do is look at what's at the scene and see what avenues it takes you to so you can get some other information. I'm going to check with you guys. I'm going to go to Brent Turvey, which is the #1 book I recommend for criminal profiling. This is Brent Turvey's book. This is one of the older editions, but considering that, I don't know if you can see this, I wrote all over this edition, even though I have the new edition. This is one I'm keeping because I had so many things I circled all the way through the book. So, criminal profiling, Brent Turvey. Okay, now let me check your comments, and then I'm going to go to Brent Turvey, and then I'm going to give you my analysis here. All right, let's see. Okay. Let's see. Put us out of our misery. No, we're supposed to be learning here. Extremely rare, but indications it could be the case. Yes, you can't take away extremely rare, but you also can't jump to it either. This is the whole problem. It's a real issue. Okay, so here, can't stand the suspense. Okay, I'm going to go to Brent Turvey. All right, and then I'll go to my theory, thinking on this. All right, this is Brent Turvey, forensic scientist and criminal profiler. He says that the neck wound, I'm sorry, I can't read under my light. It's here. That some of this had been afflicted after death. This paired with the destruction of evidence and symbolism of the murder itself indicated to him that this was wait a minute, that's not, okay, all right. This was paired with destruction of evidence and symbolism of the murder itself indicated to him that this was an anger-oriented sexual homicide. Okay. I disagree with that. There's no proof that this is what it is. I don't know why he jumped to that conclusion, but then he goes to the part I actually agree with. Surprisingly, though, he was not certain that the killer was male, telling the Oklahoman, for example, the burning of the hair, that is something a female killer might do. Interesting. So he's talking about this because it's going to be a rage crime from a sexual rage crime, and now he's saying it's a female. Maybe. Okay, let's go on. Brent Turvey could also state it was possible for the body not to have been posed, believing that the positioning of Carol's body when she was found might have happened naturally during the commission of the crime, stating it's either one of two things, which always helps. It's either 50% this, 50% that. I'm all going to be right then. It's either one of two things. It could have been deliberate. They were in a church, it put in position, perhaps a defiant way of saying, screw you and your God. Look how your God didn't help you. Or it was not at all deliberate and her body just fell that way. It's highly common to find a nude body lying on the ground with her arms outstretched like a cross. In fact, it happens all the time. And that's true. I agree with Brent Turvey on that. Because what happens is a lot of times you throw a body down or they fall down, their arms flail out, and then it looks like a cross. Now, if it happened outside of a church, people would just say she's lying on the ground. But because it's in a church, they say, oh my God, she's been crucified. You see, this is where we jump to conclusions. Now, he talks about a female being possibly involved. And I think that's really interesting because nobody else suggested that except him about the hair. Very interesting. Let me read the last line. I'll go to what I'm thinking. There is someone who felt they've been pushed too far. Oh, no, this is a follow-up article. This is someone who felt they've been pushed too far or wrong by something she had done. They felt like they had to do these things. But this person was in a complete rage, a blind rage. All right, now he's going to total rage and moving away from sexual homicide. Okay. Now, do I think it's a sexual homicide? I do not. I do not. I don't see any evidence of this except for the nude body. I think she was made nude for one of two reasons. One, evidence on clothing, possible, or the fact they wanted to make it look like a sexual homicide, and they staged it. I see no evidence that this was any kind of sexual thing at all. I don't see it. What I do see, I get the rage thing. The question is, what is causing the rage thing? Now, let me look at how she was killed. Now, I can't prove this at this point, but here is my thinking of how she was killed and why I think, yes, a woman might have been involved. There might have been a male and a female. There might have been one person that committed the crime, another person helped them out later. But the question is, were they in the church when she arrived, or did they come in after her? All right, let me take a look at this. Let me show you these pictures again. This is the front of her body. Most people are focused on the cut throat. And you see all those stabby things on her chest? All right. All right. But I'm looking at the back. Now, if you are just cutting, if you grab her from behind, you're a big dude, and she's in there, and you just grab her, you're going to do some sexual stuff. You grab her from behind, you cut her throat. Why does she have stab wounds below her neck? There's two of them. Those are stab wounds. Those are not lacerations. They're stab wounds. And I can't find out how deep they were, which annoys the crap out of me. But they're stab wounds. 1, 2. And if you look at her hand over there, it's just, I can't say this is true either, but I find it interesting. She has, not on the inside is the left hand. This is the right hand. I don't know if she's right-handed or left-handed, but on the right hand, this is the inside, which doesn't have, it's just one little cut. The outside, let me see if I got this backwards now. Shoot, which way is which? I think the right one is the outside. Hold on a second, let me think. Or is it the inside? I'm confused now. It's hard to remember. Those two stab wounds in the back. I don't see any purpose for the stab wounds to be done after they're cutting her throat and stabbing her chest. What's the point? They're not in a location which is going to kill you. So it's not like a coup de grace. Like, okay, I'm making sure you are dead. That's not where those things are. Those two stab wounds to me look to me like they stabbed her in the back, whoever it was. Now, why would they stab her in the back? So she's in the church. Got to look at the situation. She's entered the church, which she had entered the church. She unlocked the door. She went in. Supposedly, she never locked the church. So chances of her locking the door behind her are probably not so. Would indicate to me somebody else locked the door. Did they come in after her, or were they already in the church? Something occurred at that point in the church. Not a sexual homicide, because it doesn't look like that. Looks like somebody had an issue with her, or she had an issue with them. Now, because she was stabbed in the back, it looks more like to me she might have gone to the door to open it, to tell them to get out. I've talked with you guys. I can't help you out, blah, 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 blah. Come on, you got to go. Maybe they were being, I don't know, what they were acting like. She goes and does that. And the person behind her goes, stab, stab. That's why they stab her in the back, to stop her from opening the door, or whatever she's trying to do. Theoretically, she could have been going to her purse to call the police or something like that if they were really annoying to her. She was going, look, I'm going to call the police on you guys if you won't get out. I'm going to have to do that, God loves you and all that, but I got to call the police. She might have gone to her purse to pick out her phone, and they went stab, stab. Also possible. But I think she got stabbed twice in the back. And there's a very little damage to the right hand, except for when she got stabbed and she put it, you feel yourself get hit, you put your hand up, you might get cut there. Now, these are defense wounds of some sort, it appears. However, after they did the stab there, and then she falls, she turns around or whatever, that's when I personally think that the stabs to the chest continued. Boom, boom, boom. Now, if you look at her hands here, you see that large gash along the hands. Almost looks to me like she was trying to grab the knife. And it's on the left side, and if her hands are more to the left at that point, she used her left hand trying to grab the knife. People try to grab knives to stop them from going into them. It doesn't work real well, but it will cut straight through your hand like that. So I believe stab, stab, and then whatever happened, then person went stab, 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 and they're gashing. Now, mind you, there's gashes. Well, because people don't aim really well necessarily. They they're sloppy. And so you can get gashes that open up things. And then you try to stop the knife and you're like, and that doesn't work. Cut your hand. At that point, that's when I think they went for the throat. I find it a rage crime. 100% rage crime. Now, after she goes down, because that whoever slashed her up and has made sure she doesn't go for the phone to call the police or push them out of the place because they wanted to hang out there. There's a lot of homeless people there too, so who knows? Maybe they were sleeping there, and she said, "Look, we're going to have church now. You got to leave." Maybe they were doing drugs in there. So, I mean, when people do drugs, they do drugs wherever they want to do drugs. And if nobody's been in that church, they want to do drugs, they'll do them. Maybe she said you can't have drugs in the church. I don't know if she's the type to call the police. I would like to know that, whether she's ever called the police over the 10 years. Or was she one of those that would never call the police but try to help the people? I don't know. But I think she either went to the door to get them out or she went to call the police. One of those things pissed off whomever it was. Or is it whoever? Whoever it was. And at that point, and it only takes a few minutes to do what they did. Once you started in the rage and you stab somebody and they turn around and you stab them some more times and they're going to the ground and you're angry and that's all done in 1 minute, 2 minutes. It's over, especially if you're on meth or something like that. You are a very energetic human being and you will do them in really quickly. Now, the question is, once a person's done in, then what? Were they angry enough to pose her? Were they staging it to look like, I was like, oh my God, we can't have that. It looks like we killed her because we're hanging out here. Well, maybe let's make it look like a serial killer. Okay, let's take her clothes off. Now, somebody said, it's a lot of work to take her clothes off. Well, yeah, it is. But you can also just use a knife and go whoosh, 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 and rip things off that way. Now, what about the dissolving agent? Now, I don't know what dissolving agent they're talking about. And I would love to know. One of the things I think about is hairspray. That actually has a dissolving agent in it. And it also, you can light it on fire. And what does somebody carry with them? If you're sleeping in the church or something, what might you have with you? You might have hairspray if you're female. You also can use hairspray in, I think it's used in like cocaine and other things. You spray it on the actual drugs. Does something like keep them solidified together. And that person might have said, well, we'll set her on fire. Set her on fire sounds good. Maybe that's before the clothes came off. Well, let's set her on fire. And they threw the match down and it basically burned up her hair and didn't take the clothes enough on fire. This is one of the things you have to see how effective things were, depending on her clothing. What kind of clothing was she wearing? How well did they spray it? Did they spray really good on the hair and then spray around the body and not on the body enough? These are all the things that go wrong when you're committing crimes like this. And then they lit it and her hair went, but the rest of her didn't go. And they said, oh shit. Okay, we'll just take the clothes. We'll take the clothes, make it look like that. Or maybe they were trying to get rid of it. Maybe somebody got cut and the blood was on her clothes and they decided they're going to burn her up. And then it didn't work. They took her clothes so that DNA wouldn't be there. Who knows? I don't. So for me, if I'm looking at this, I would say the most probable to me, I don't see a sexual homicide. I don't actually see posing. I think it's more like she fell that way. But if they did pose her because it amused them at the time, fine, whatever. I see it as a rage crime. I would be looking for the people who are more likely to be involved in homelessness and drugs than anybody who is personally after her. I think she may have found them in the church and just didn't like what was going on and wanted them to leave. And that would also make sense in the sense that they might therefore have bags with them, trash bags with their clothing in it or their whatever else they've got, their drugs, alcohol, whatever. And then when they grabbed her clothes, they just chucked them in the bag and ran. So, I mean, because otherwise you got to carry all that crap out in your arms, But if they have their stuff with them, knives, hairspray, all that stuff would more likely to be in a bag. Now, there was supposedly, after this happened, years later, there was this woman. Let's see if I find it. Okay, all right. This woman here, years later, she became a suspect, and she was a meth head. She had been in prison. She had assault charges. Somebody said that she and this dude over here at the time were involved. Her name was Carol Daniels. I'm sorry, not Carol Daniels. Sorry, that's the victim. Where's the name of the woman? Her name was Denise Cooper. This is both her pictures. She's got less teeth here. Denise Cooper. In 2003, Denise Cooper was convicted of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon and would stand time in state custody. Nearly a decade later, in 2012, she would plead guilty to the distribution of methamphetamine, which put her on probation for 25 years. She later spent 6 months in prison for parole violations. Evidence implicating Denise Cooper in the murder of Carol Daniels would be presented in front of a Caddo County grand jury in 2017, with at least 2 witnesses being brought to provide testimony. And there are 2 other guys. They also had, this is one of them. His name was Kevin Mahan. Also had prior arrest for distributing methamphetamine while was serving time for assault and battery of a police officer. Both men refused to answer questions in front of the grand jury. And that was that. And then they thought they were trying to establish robbery as a motive, but I don't necessarily think it's robbery. I may think it's more like she found them where she didn't want them. And so now they're saying maybe the 3 of them are involved. Only problem with this, it was presented in front of a grand jury in months after the death of Denise Cooper. She passed away from cancer, so she wasn't around anymore. The 55-year-old suspect had been linked to Carol Daniels' murder for years through local gossip, but the convening of this grand jury months after Cooper's death made it official for the first time. And there was this, is that here? Yeah, there was some shed that supposedly they thought that they were having meth in there, and then the shed burned down. That somebody saw bloody people and stuff going to the shed and burning up crap. I don't know the validity of all of that. But could these people be involved? This woman and this guy, possibly, because to me, somebody very local, somebody involved with drugs, somebody involved with all kinds of issues of violence and homelessness and all that stuff. I'm going to go with those as the more likely, because this place is such a good place to just hang out in. It's a great free home. I would love to know from the police records whether homeless people were in here, whether drug people were in here, and she had dealt with them before, maybe over time, maybe this time, maybe she did know them. Maybe she came in and said, "Look, dudes, I told you to get out. You can't be here again. And hey, I'm done with this. I'm calling the police, or I'm done with this. You got to get out." And one of those lost their minds and stabbed her. But that is, to me, the most logical, most evidence-supported possibility. And again, I say possibility. I don't have access to all those records that I want to have access to. If I did, I could say I can hone in on it more. But if I were working with the police and this is all I had, I'd say this is where I'd be looking first. And then if I got more information, I might say, okay, I'm moving it over here. But right now, with this information, I'd be looking this direction. Do I think it's this particular woman and this guy? I don't know. Very possibly. But I think it's more likely them than a serial killer or a strange boyfriend. I mean, I just don't see that in her case. I see her as being one of those people who deals with people who are not always the safest people to be around, and they are very unpredictable. And when they're revved up on some kind of drugs, the violence can be very extreme. And because they have that level of excess energy that you don't have without the drugs, cocaine, amphetamines in general, gives you lots of energy. That's where I would go with the most probable analysis of this. But can't prove it. And I can't prove it. And it's just don't have enough information. I'd love to have the rest of the information. I want to know, could they identify hairspray? Are they identifying any other kind of solvent that somebody would have either in the church? And did she clean in the church? I just don't know. I want to know what was in the church at the time, because I'm thinking if there was like some solvent in the church, if they used to pour around the body, they're not going to waste their time taking that solvent with them, unless it was something they brought in, then they take it back out. So I would like to know what is in the church that could be used to pour over the body, or was it nothing from the church? Was it something they brought? Was it? And I don't think anybody brought anything with a plan to get rid of DNA. I think that's nonsense. I think that would be one of those things that as your brain starts spinning, oh, what do we do now? What are we going to do? That kind of thing. They had 2 hours. It took 5 minutes to kill her. They got lots of extra time to figure out what to do because they locked the dang door. And again, I don't even know whether they locked the door when she was there, or they locked the door after they killed her and then locked the door so nobody come in while they're figuring out what the heck to do. I would go with that more. I personally think she either walked in the church and found them in there and had this discussion with them and things went bad. And after they killed her, they went and locked the door so they could figure out what to do with her body and then ran out the back door. That's where I'd come. That's generally speaking what I think happened. I would think they locked afterwards. I don't think they went and locked the door and said, no, we're not letting you out. I personally think that's not as likely. I would go, they locked it in order to be able to take care of business, to try to figure out what to do with the person that just stabbed to death. So that's my theory. Let me see what you think. All right. Patient's done. It's like, but I want you to understand all the processes different people go through. It's important. Let's see. Wait a minute. Let me go back up here. This is very true. When you're a drug user, logic escapes you. It does. It puts you in a different world. Same thing. Sometimes people get drunk. They just get stupid. They do stupid stuff. And it's not like it's not actually in them, but it allows that to get out of them. And also, I say, it gives you a whole different physical approach to things. Let's say, was he trying to remove the head? I don't think so. A lot of times if people are cut through the throat, people say, oh, they were trying to cut the head off. Not necessarily. When you have a good knife, you can slash really hard. And they slash. That would be more of a rage thing. And once you do that enough, then the head kind of falls off. Are there people who specifically try to remove heads? Absolutely. And then they walk around holding them up like this. Yeah. Yes. But I don't think that this is necessarily so. Again, I would like to see, if I were looking at the crime scene, I want to see what the blood spatter pattern is. I want to see where the blood is pooled. I want to see what's happening. But we don't have any of that. So I cannot. Do what? Turned over? Who's turning over? I don't understand that. Things happen very quickly. People flail around. If they stabbed her in the back, they could have stabbed her back, and then she got like this, and she turned around, and then they stabbed her here, and then she's collapsing, and then this. It's not all fancy stuff. You know what I mean? It's not. But I personally think she was attacked from the back, because those two make no sense to me outside of that possibility. I see no good reason for it otherwise. I think she was stabbed in the back, either going for a phone to call the police or going to tell them to get the heck out or whatever. I don't even know what it would be. Calling the police might be a problem. People do this thing where they actually tell people, I'm going to call the police. And then they go to their purse. Guess what? They never get to call the police. And it's like, don't announce that and make the reach, because sometimes that's the last thing you'll reach for. But they seem to think that might scare them off or whatever. But sometimes it just gets them killed. She had no money. We don't know that. So that's a conclusion jumping. We have no idea how much money. Maybe she brought $500 with her to fix up the church. Maybe she had 25 cents. I have no idea. They haven't told us at all. Yeah, and unfortunately, more and more towns are having a meth problem. I mean, meth is just it's ungodly. I mean, and it's small towns across the United States, in the country, on the countryside. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Small towns are being devastated by meth. So again, I'm not going to get on my whole soapbox today, but when people say drugs is a victimless crime, you're full of crap. Drugs are one of the most victim-filled crimes in the world. When you take them, you harm yourself, you harm everybody in your family, you harm the community. You support the drug cartels. Those drug cartels kill people there, here, and everywhere. So I'm not very nice about people who take drugs either, who just say it's my business. It's not just your business. When you take drugs, you're committing a crime. Okay, that's the end of my soapbox. That's the end of my soapbox. What? How could homeless people get access to chemicals? Hairspray. You don't think homeless people have hairspray? You don't have homeless people. Don't you know that people who are homeless often have certain things that they use for certain other things? They have alcohol. They have certain products. Some of them are stolen products. Some of them are involved in drugs. Homeless and drugs. So that sometimes you're selling drugs because you need the drugs, but you also sometimes manufacture certain aspects of the drugs, like in maybe little sheds that burn up. And other times, it's like this. It's depends on the day. So homeless doesn't mean you can't have items. Some homeless people have so many freaking items they take up an entire block with their crap. Haven't you seen that? With the person they're living in a RV, a burnout RV, and they've got like 50 bags of plastic trash bags of crap. Guess they go through dumps. They steal from people. They guess I don't know what homeless world you live in, but yeah, they could have many types of dissolving agents. I just don't know which ones it was, But yeah, could it also come from the church? Absolutely, but we just don't know, and so we have to accept that we don't know. Let's see. Kelly says, so I was right, female and addiction issues. Can I say it's female? No, I can't. And I can't say it's not two people. I can't say it's not one person who did it and the other one that helped out. I can't say. There's no way to say. But very possible. And, a lot of times we forget that females can be vicious and violent, and they can be. So, wow, adopt a psychopath. Oh my God. No, thank you. That's a terrible thought. We have enough of them that we own already. We don't need to adopt anymore. Oh my God. Sarah would just get the teacher's pet shirt. She might today, because I like what Sarah said today, so she might. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Some of these comments, when I comment on the comments, I actually don't know the whole conversation that went before, so I could be taking it completely out of context. I could be. There's some funny stuff in here. If you have a like mind of some of the people in our chat room, they're all great, but some of them are a little bit unique. I only say that because I'm not so far away from that myself. So I'm so poor I can't afford drug addiction. Well, good. Anything that keeps you away from drugs. Anything. Just stay away from those drugs. Can't stand this thing. And that is sadly true, Kathy. If people will find any way to buy a drug of choice, yeah, and it comes down to prostitution, stealing, robbery, whatever, because that's what drugs do to you. That's why it's a crime. It's a crime to yourself as well as to everybody else. It's just, I think the fact that we look away from drug addiction, we only look at drug addiction as how we can, let's have more programs, but we never seem to want to stop the nonsense. That's a crap from being on all our streets and into the schools and having our children get involved in it when they're even just young teens. Oh, I forgot another thing. Huffing. Forgot about huffing. Okay, huffing. Also, the reason you might have hairspray is it's something you can huff. If you don't understand what huffing is, you take that stuff and you spray up. I don't know, spray it in your mouth, spray it in your nose. I've never huffed. So this is often used by poor children, like in Brazil and like locations where they have massive slums and the kids can't afford anything but some kind of spray. I think Cool Whip is pretty good for that too. If you're not just Cool Whip into your mouth, which is pretty tasty, but you can also huff with it. But hairspray is a huffing tool. And so if you are low on meth, you might huff. So hairspray is one of the cheaper things you can buy. And also you can see the amount of people stealing from CVS right now. They go in there and they'll do this on the CVS. They'll do this on the hairspray shelf. They'll take 12 cans of hairspray out and they can huff the crap out of that stuff. That will keep you going in between trying to find better drugs. So that's another reason it could be hairspray that you'd have with you. I almost forgot to mention that. Yes. All right. Oh, some comments I can't even put on the screen. Whew. Oh Lord. Lex, by the way, I'm not going to put your comment on the screen, but I understand people get very upset with me when I specifically focus on certain things, but I focus on them because regardless of why we get involved in things, whether we get involved in drugs, whether we get involved in crime, whether we get involved in prostitution, whether we get involved with a psychopath for a mate, whether we do all of these things on a personal, separate basis, that's something, that we have to deal with. And I, it's kind of like, on a one-to-one basis, you can work with people and you do your emotional thing and all that kind of stuff and try to do the support thing. But on a large basis, when you have massive amounts of drugs flowing into the community, into the schools, and people downplaying it, that's how people get where they get. It's not, you're 14 years old and somebody says, hey, try this. Then you try that. I'm not blaming the 14-year-old. I'm blaming the damn people who brought the drugs in here and all the policies that allow drugs to roll into the country like that. Once a person's there, then you're screwed because you have a hard time getting out of it. Now, when it comes to an adult, I have less sympathy. Once you an adult, you really making that choice. I think a lot of younger people, they don't know what they're doing. But but as an adult, we have to take responsibility. If we're gonna break the law and use drugs, well, then we are partly responsible for the drug problems. We are. We can't run away from that. It's illegal. You go do it. You're over 18 years old. You decide to do coke. You decide to do meth. You decide to do whatever whatever. You're breaking the law. You're choosing to do something illegal, something dangerous to not only you, but to society, to children, and everybody else. And so we have to take responsibility for that. Maybe someday we fight back, we go get ourselves whole again, we get off drugs, and we come back, and then we work to get rid of the problem. And that's good. I mean, people do make dumb and bad decisions, but hopefully one day they wake up and it all changes. So and that's all we can hope. But I think we need to fight harder. We need to fight harder against the nonsense. Oh, that's true. Hairspray is an adhesive. That's why I think there's a thing where you spray it on like certain things of cocaine and it holds them together. Not so good for the people using the cocaine because then they get the chemicals and the hairspray into themselves. That's not real healthy. So that's a bad idea. Let's see. So anyway, let's walk away from that. It's one of these things where when drugs come into the picture, it's just so upsetting. I spent time in Mexico, and the cartels down there, just they're moving into the country at a rapid rate. I mean, they're all over the eastern coast now. They're all mid-America. They're California. It's craziness. And I don't think we saw it coming. What's going to happen in this country with a loosening of laws? People aren't the brightest things in the world. Sometimes, it's like if I was told certain food is illegal, I wouldn't go eat it. But if you tell me it's legal now, it may not be healthy for me. I'm going to go eat it, because I can. I mean. One of the things, like, for example, as a profiler, when I was in television, I smoked some weed when I was 19, 20, somewhere around there. Had a kid, I never touched it again. Once I had a kid, I was like, not touching that stuff because I didn't want that around my child. But also, it's kind of funny, after the children were all grown, and, I was down in Guatemala, and I was on this island where weed was legal. And somebody offered me weed. They're like, hey, have some weed with us. And I mean, I stopped to think about it. I'm like, well, it's legal here. And, my kids are grown. I'm on vacation. I haven't had weed in like 20 years. Maybe it'd be interesting. Because it was legal, I stopped to think about it. Now, the thing that kept me from doing it was, first of all, I was kind of creeped out because the weed these days, you never know what the hell's in the stuff. But the other thing was, my thought was, what if somebody here has a camera? Look, it's Pat Brown. And it ends up on the internet, because that is, I have a reputation to uphold. So there were two things that kept me from doing it. One is I don't know what's in the weed, because it was legal there. Don't know what's in the weed. And also my reputation. And I didn't know if I really wanted to be high either. I mean, there was a bunch of things running through my head. But now Maryland, it's becoming legalized in Maryland. I can now, and pretty soon, I think it's January, February, somewhere in there, it'll be legal. I can go now, go down the street and buy gummies and everything else I want, and sit in my house and get high as hell. Now, since it's illegal, well, it has been illegal, there's no way I would have crossed that line. But now that it's legal, I can see myself going, if I just had a couple gummies tonight, it might be nice. See how easy you get sucked into things. And once we start putting a gray line there, and people start stepping over and they start using more and more mind-altering substances, that's one of those gateway drugs. And I know they say marijuana is not, but I don't believe it for a minute, because the whole concept is you're changing your mindset. And I know alcohol is an issue too, so I won't get into the whole argument. But this is what happens when we have the issues of illegality and illegality. But I understand why people get drawn. I understand why people think, why not? This will be interesting. Let me step over. Let me have some mushrooms. I'm in Colombia. I'll have some mushrooms and see if I can meet my spirit guide. Things, entice. Things are enticing. And the younger the people are, the easier they are to entice. So I'm a very strong anti-drug person. And for that reason, not because I hate people who do drugs, but because I hate the fact that they are doing the drugs and that we're giving them to them and that our policies are allowing it. So, but anyway, I don't know if drug users killed her. All right. I don't know if that's anything to do with what happened to this woman. But I would say I don't see it as a sexual homicide. I don't see it as a grudge crime by somebody who was like a family member or a boyfriend or anything. I don't see any of that. I think this woman was the type of woman that we wish was in every neighborhood. The neighbor we want, the church lady we want, the person who makes our neighborhoods good. We need hundreds of these women and hundreds of these kind of men to make our neighborhoods better, to help with the elderly, to help people become non-homeless and off of drugs. We need them to help with the children and the teenagers. She did all of these things and got killed anyway. They lost a great person, and probably, in my opinion, not because some serial killer was rolling through, because of some stupid crap that was going on when she walked in on it or whatever. And I don't know, but that would be more the bigger possibility, in my opinion. So anyway, so that is my thoughts on that. All right. So anyway, that's it for today. I'm glad you were all here. We're a wonderful group. And again, if you're new to the channel, please do like, please do subscribe. It keeps the channel going. One does need subs. And join Patreon if you would like to be in the chat room with really nice people who are super fun. And that makes our community a nice community. And we also have like a chat every week, which we, people can comment back and forth and get to know each other. And a lot of people here really do know each other. It's pretty cool. And so anyway, thank you all for being here. It's just everybody says good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. I like, and purple. I was like, what is she saying? Purple. Purple. Yeah. It's one of my, I for the shows, I just buy these in all different colors. I just don't have a lot of energy for figuring out what I'm going to wear. So it has to be simple. When I used to do sign language interpreting, you could never have prints because it was distracting to interpreting. But I think the same thing is true for regular shows. Even when you do television, they tell you don't wear prints and stripes because so you just wear plain colors. So you just go and say, I'll buy a blue, red, purple. You just go down the list, and that's what I wear for the shows. So that's the way I do it. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. I will see you for the hangout midweek. It'll be Thursday. So I'll see you for the hangout. Until then, bye.